To you, it may feel like you're finally making a healthy effort to engage in a normal romantic relationship by taking her out for a drink. To her, it may seem that you are simply creepily going through the motions in order to try to get her into bed with you. Or if you do eventually find yourself in a regular relationship, what may feel refreshingly healthy and natural to you might feel like an overwhelming preoccupation with sex to her. She may be alarmed by your rough mannerisms in the bedroom, pulling her hair, slapping her ass, and gripping her throat during sex, or you're trying to ram your genital organ in and out of her throat as if it were her vagina. She may be frightened by the speed and force with which you penetrate her, slamming into her as hard and fast as you can, with violence which could leave her with bruising the next day. She may feel uneasy about the way you insist on ejaculating over her face every time that you have sex with her, or your strange and fanatical insistence that she swallows every drop of your ejaculate. She may, probably sooner rather than later, decide that you are a perverted sex maniac and end her relationship with you. My reason for creating this video is to draw attention to what I see as a dangerous oversimplification of, or perhaps an oversight in, that aspect of conventional rebooting wisdom, which encompasses the process of race socialization. You know what I am alluding to here. You have read the pages on the basics of rebooting, which are attached to every major porn addiction recovery website, and you are no doubt aware of the inevitable exhortations to make an effort to socialize with real women again as opposed to limiting yourself to the pictures or videos of particularly pretty ones, to which you've thus far been finding it far more convenient to devote your attention and to rewire your brain to sex with real partners. Of course, these are patently necessary steps in overcoming porn-induced sexual dysfunctions such as PIDE, and the assorted problems with ejaculation from which many long-time porn users suffer, and in eliminating from our minds that underlying sexual conditioning which necessitates the intermediary presence of a computer screen in order for us to find a woman sexually arousing, and which thus gives rise to all those physical symptoms in the first place, as well, of course, as being a necessary step towards a richer and more wholesome social life, characterized by meaningful relationships to real living, breathing human beings. Beyond that particular form of sexual conditioning touched upon above, however, and the nasty type covered extensively elsewhere, which leads ordinary people to fall victim to strange and undignified sexual fetishes, one hears very little mention of any additional forms of pernicious sexual conditioning, say perhaps occasionally, from feminists and women's rights groups, who warn of porn objectifying women and normalizing violent sex. Well, I believe that the women's rights groups and feminists, whatever their other prejudices and shortcomings, have come closer here than anyone in revealing and drawing attention to the third major form of sexual conditioning associated with chronic porn use, one which I would argue is just as dangerous and just as damaging as the first two, yet which is far less visible, being altogether more subtle, and which even holds the power of hijacking a well-meaning reboot's efforts to transition to more wholesome relationships with real people. Now, it may transpire that the hidden and deadly effect of long-term porn use, to which I am to refer and elucidate here, one which I have not yet seen emphasized on any of the many porn addiction websites, is unique to me, or that perhaps it is not that widespread, and thus significant a problem to merit much community attention being drawn to it. Though somehow I expect that it is rather more common than you might first think, though certainly it is not readily apparent when one is yet immersed in the sleepy sea of self-indulgent stupefaction that is regular porn use. The problem, in a nutshell, is what I shall term porn-induced sexual preoccupation. It is a two-pronged beast, consisting on the one hand of a distorted and unnatural view of the nature and essence of sex, as it ought to occur between a man and a woman, and on the other, of an exaggerated degree of importance and significance being placed by the long-time porn user on the role and place of sex within a romantic relationship in the real world. This latent conditioning, lying dormant in the mind of the long-term porn user, can cause relationship problems galore once he begins the process of rebooting and starts trying to form romantic relationships with women in the real world. Particularly, I would summarize if he started using porn as an adolescent and experienced extensive porn use before any real romantic relationships occurred. The peculiarity of this problem is that if an ex-porn user isn't aware of this underlying cause for his continual social and romantic failures, he will likely either continue banging his head against a social brick wall, if you will, and getting absolutely nowhere, or after a time, perhaps decide that he is simply repulsive to women for some unfathomable, though deeply personal reason, and either give up and go back to porn, or worse, become frustrated and begin to blame his errant failure on womankind themselves, leading to the insidious growth of a cynical and misogynistic mental outlook. Something which could lead to a very ugly and ignominious future indeed. Porn, after all, with its love for enormous male genitalia. Rough and frantic sex engaged in spontaneously, often by total strangers in the most utterly inappropriate places and situations. Or worse, between people who shouldn't be having sex with each other at all. Porn, with its depictions of frenzied women who, despite leading nominally respectable lives as doctors, real estate agents, nurses, etc., apparently would secretly like nothing more in life than to physically succeed in swallowing the most enormous specimen of the male genital organ, which they might conceivably get their hands upon. Porn, in its obsession with tiny women and great, hulking men, with its love for ludicrous contrasts, presence and abnormal and distinctly physical representation of sex. A strange parody that would be funny if it weren't so damaging to so many. Sex in porn is something that a man does to a woman, not with a force of nature which is depicted as being so powerful, ecstatic, and fundamentally inexorable as to trump all other human considerations, including personal relationships and obligations to one's family or society. Is it really so implausible, then, that a young porn addict of, let's say, around 20 years old might, through his years of consistent porn use, spanning his most malleable and impressionable years, have obtained an abnormally rough, physical, and impersonal conception of sex, or that he might attach a grossly exaggerated degree of significance and importance to its role in real romantic relationships? This obsessive focus on sex not only harmed my attempts at re-socializing, but eventually led me to become frustrated, and my life to become shallow and empty. I began to become indignant with women in general, and nebulous misogynistic notions began to form in my mind. It was on becoming aware of this dramatic transformation, suddenly seeing the dark place to which this path was leading, that I became convinced that something was profoundly not right, and determined to abandon the seedy lifestyle which I had been leading. After several months of abstinence and some serious reflection, the pieces began slowly to fall into place. I began to perceive for the first time that my view of women, and of the essence of social relations with them, had been deeply flawed. It became clear to me that being attractive is not a skill, but a quality, a unique, composite one, made up of the many diverse factors and parts which make up our lives and personalities, our beliefs, and our values, of which honesty and authenticity are not unimportant members. I saw that my life was empty and going nowhere, and that my obsession with sex had deprived me of any real interests or aspirations. I began to study and to kindle healthy new interests and aspirations, whilst simultaneously working on changing my attitudes towards women, developing my capacity for empathy and understanding, and just plain honest fun. I no longer measure my success with women by the number of notches on my bedpost, but rather by the warm, meaningful interactions which I have, and by the quality of the human beings at the other end of them. These days I enjoy the idea of what I can contribute to a relationship just as much as that which I can get out of it for myself. I don't even think consciously anymore about success with women. I have long since realized that such success is qualitative and cannot be measured or quantitatively targeted. But surely the strangest thing in all of this is that since I ceased to obsess, learned to focus on the human being behind the pretty face, and since I began to form more healthy interests and aspirations, the reactions which I elicit from women are far more positive than they ever were during those obsessive years of socializing. The interactions that I am party to are much more authentic and enjoyable. I now feel empathy, as well as an attraction for the ladies that I meet, and have even on a few occasions felt the stirrings of love.